Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to Adrian's Digital Basement. This is part 2 in the Commodore 64 Repair-a-thon. In this video, we're going to look at the second machine, and possibly more. If this thing just needs a simple fix, I'll move on to the third one. But before I do that, I want to revisit the first machine that I fixed in part 1. If you haven't watched that part yet, I'd recommend you do it, because I seem to have discovered another fault in it. So without further ado, let's get right to it. When I sat down to start shooting this video, I wanted to put the first machine back together, put all the screws back in, and just give it a final test. And when I did, I noticed as I was testing the keyboard that certain characters result in this weird pattern, these lines that are moving through it. And it's not all, like you see all these letters up here, and these letters I typed down here are fine, but the pound symbol, the back arrow, the left, or the right bracket, I'm sorry, plus some other pesky characters, results in this weird, these lines going through it. And they seem to, it doesn't really matter where on the screen they are, it does it anywhere. But at the same time, if I type a bunch of stuff in here, and when I hit enter, you'll notice the pattern changes. Watch when I hit enter. See, it sort of changed for a second there. Hopefully that came across in the camera. So I guess there's just a little bit more troubleshooting that I need to do on this machine before I can call it good. So immediately when I saw this problem, I thought that maybe it was the character generator that is the problem. I did test this on my ZIF64, but on that machine, I didn't really give it much of a test. I just turned on the machine just to make sure that there was the image, and that looks the same on this. When you just hit the regular basic prompt, everything looks completely fine. If I take that out and I turn the computer on, you'll see what this looks like. And there it is, all the letters are missing, and notice looks pretty similar with these lines. I mean, it's not exactly the same, but it's like that. But if I type, it's just every single character looks the same. So that's why I'm thinking that it's the character generator. So I'm going to pop in the one from the ZIF64, which has the skinny character fonts. In case you're wondering how I installed a different font in the Commodore 64, I used a TMS 2532A EEPROM. Now these are hard to program. You can't just program these on a TL866. I had to use my data IO, but with this, it does just plug straight into the Commodore 64, and you can put any font you want on it, so I loaded the VIC-20 font. You can't just stick the ROM chip from the VIC-20 into the 64. That doesn't work, and that's because the chip that Commodore uses is slightly different on the VIC-20. In fact, you can't even use this chip in a VIC-20 either. I think it's because the VIC-20 has extra chip select lines that the 64 doesn't have. 64 can work just with a standard EEPROM. So let's see what happens if I turn this on now. Will it have fixed the problem with those characters? Okay, so regular letters are working fine. How about the bracket and back arrow? Yeah, so those are now working perfectly. So clearly the issue is this character generator ROM. It obviously has a couple of the, whatever, the row or address selections that are flaky and sort of intermittent and not driving the bus properly, which is why those characters look screwy. I'm just going to type every character on here just to make sure that no other letters are still screwed up, like maybe the fault is somewhere else on this machine. And yes, a quick test of just typing random keys. I know several of these characters were doing that before, and they're working now, so that just means that this chip is also bad. And right here is another one of the stock character generators for this machine. It was just sitting on the side of my bench. So I'll pop that one in, turn this on. All right, when I type the characters that are flaky, yep, they're looking good now. Let me switch to white so it's a little easier to see. There we go. Everything is working just fine now. So this bad chip here that was in this machine, unfortunately, it gets the X, and then it gets the bad parts bin. Duh. All right, here is machine number 2. Looks like the screws have already been removed. Let's see what we can see about this. This is not a Rev A, but, oh, it's a PAL machine. Okay, made in West Germany. Awesome. All right, so let's pop this open. Okay, oh, look at this. Here we go. Dead test, nothing. Random horizontal bars, black screen, Yuli. So this one came from Yuli. Let's start with the observation phase. So it's got all soldered chips except for the VIC-2 and the SID. So that's cool. The SID's actually in here. I'm just going to remove the SID while I'm here. We don't need to do any testing with this in here, just in case something goes wrong and kills the SID chip. Judging by the note, I already powered this thing up before. I just don't remember how much troubleshooting I actually did when I powered it up. So might as well start from scratch again. So we'll plug this all in. I don't know where the cover for the RF modulator went. Oh, what's this? Oh, it's the screws. That's right, because the international machines, the ones from Germany, they had used much smaller screws when they put the case together. The motherboard into here and the cover on the top. So if you try to use American screws in this brittle plastic, it will most likely crack the case. So I'm glad I saved the screws there, and I have already removed this from the machine. Also, something else to notice is that there has never been an RF shield soldered onto the bottom. If you notice on the strip here, on this ground plane strip, there are no blobs of solder. So if I flip this over, yeah, this thing, if it had an RF shield, it might have been the thin cardboard type, but it certainly never had the type that were soldered on here. I'm going to get this thermal compound off of the VIC-2 chip here. I just want to see which revision this is. It's obviously a PAL chip, so it's 6569. Ah, it's an R3. I'm not totally familiar with all of the revisions on the PAL side, so I'm not sure, like, where is that, if that's early or late for the bread bin types, but I know that I have another PAL machine and it has an earlier revision that has relatively ugly video output. Hopefully this one is less ugly. All right, let me turn this on. Let's quickly confirm the trouble that I wrote on the note here. Okay, the screen is coming on. Yep, black screen, so not even any bars. All right, so we have the multimeter here. First, let's do some checks just to see if the voltage rails are indeed correct. We have 5.0 volts there, which is perfect, and 11.9 on the 12 volt rail, which is also perfect. So there's no danger to running this machine. Here's my homebrew cartridge configured for dead test. Let's pop this in, see what we get. Turn it back on. With dead test in there, we get a solid red box here. Let me just power cycle it again. Strange, I'm noticing the picture is shifted down. That could be this NEC monitor. It may not support, oh, now it's not so shifted down. I was about to say maybe it doesn't support the PAL frequencies that the RetroTink is putting. I think it's putting out 50 hertz. Let's just check the menu real quick. And yes, it is putting out 50 hertz, which maybe this screen doesn't like. It seems to be working, but I don't know why it was shifted down. That could be the RetroTink. Either way, this red box we're seeing here, that is not normal. That is coming from a 64 itself. I'll just give it one more power cycle, and it goes immediately to red as well. And just for fun, I'm gonna switch to the other diagnostic cartridge mode on here because, well, it's black screen. But yeah, I assume that would work. Just in case it did work, I didn't want to go down the rabbit hole like I did last time, chasing my tail on things that weren't false. All right, so next step, I got to power up the oscilloscope. We're going to use that to do a little bit of troubleshooting. So with the machine powered on, I'm going to take my oscilloscope probe and I'm going to check pin 2 on all of the RAM chips. And the RAM chips here are empty. Very bad sign. I'm pretty sure one or more of these is going to be bad. So let's go through all of these. All right, so right off the bat, this looks weird. Why isn't it going all the way down to 0 volts, which is around here where my finger is? It's starting up here, which could be too high. Let's look at the other ones. That'll tell us if this is normal or not. Oh, that doesn't look good either. Like, what's happening here? Why is this all up in the middle? Okay, so this one actually looks pretty normal. It's going from, what, 5 volts all the way down to here, which is close to 0 volts. This one, you notice it's got this line here in the middle. That just, it looks very abnormal. Okay, this one here, well, it's just sort of stuck. Let's shrink this down a little bit. No, okay, there's activity. So I'd say that's not too bad. You know, in fact, I'm gonna pull the dead test cartridge out of here. So I turned it off, dead test back on. Okay, the machine on without the dead test in there. So this looks like okay activity. I mean, the computer's not running, it's kind of crashed. This one, oh, this one looks a little bit more normal now, to be honest. And this one here, it's still got this weird thing happening in the middle there. Okay, now we're on the 4th chip. That looks fine. Let's check the next row. Lots of activity there. That doesn't look too unusual. This is having that weird thing again where you have this weird sort of in-between thing happening. All right, and then that chip looks like that. All right, so nothing looks immediately out of the ordinary. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna feel these for heat to see if any of them are really hot. And actually, none of them are. My hunch at this point is that the PLA has failed, and it's what's causing all of this all these weird problems. On the PLA, every single pin that I check is just high. That doesn't seem right. And here's an example of a strange output. It's pin 16. Why is it so low like this? What's happening exactly? Let me power cycle the computer on and off while we're looking at that. Yeah, this doesn't seem right. But that doesn't mean the PLA is bad, actually. Could well be something else. Hey, look at that, we got a white screen here. Okay, so on the 3 ROM chips here, pin 20 is the chip select line on all 3 of these, and that is driven directly from the PLA, which is under my hand. So when I turn on the computer, I am on pin 20 on the character select ROM. You'll see that the way the chip select lines should look. See, it kind of went up, and then there are these little drops down. Oh, look at those lines that are happening. And that is because this chip is being selected on and off by the PLA. Okay, see that? That's normal. If I move to the kernel ROM and we turn it on, it's always low. And that would mean that this chip is always being selected. Now it's not completely at 0, but this is probably 0 enough that it's probably always being selected. And if we look at the basic ROM, it looked normal there. You see how when I first turned it on, you saw some up and downs? Now it's just sort of stuck, but there, that initial part looked normal. Now at this point, I'm gonna say that the kernel ROM is bad or the PLA is bad, but I'm actually gonna go out and say that it's the kernel ROM that's the problem. And that's because on the oscilloscope, we saw some up and down. It just was all the way near ground. And I'm thinking that the kernel ROM is actually shorting the PLA's output and keeping it down near ground. Now with the multimeter on resistance, if I check pin 20, it's definitely not shorted to ground. We have, what is this, 10 megohm there. So what's happening when you turn the computer on? I guess it's not a short, it's something holding the pin down around ground. So maybe now that makes me think that it is the PLA that's the problem. And I mean, it's a PLA in one of these bread bin boards. It's more than likely the problem, to be honest, and this empty RAM. So this machine probably has multiple faults. So I think the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna remove the PLA chip, I'm gonna desolder that, and we'll try a replacement, see if that makes a difference. If you wanna see the way I remove chips, I'll put a link in the description below to a video I made where I show the technique I use, which is a combination of desoldering iron plus the hot air gun. I also showed in part 1 how I removed the first chip, but this PLA came out no problem, no damage traces, and no trauma to this board at all. And now it's just a matter of installing a new socket in place of the old one, like that. I'm gonna use one of these round holed ones. I prefer these over this type. They just seem a little bit more durable to me. And when you're installing a new socket like this, make sure you just solder 2 pins, 1 on each side first. Then you can make sure that the socket is flush with the motherboard or whatever you're soldering it into by heating up that one joint and then pushing it from the underside. Make sure you don't burn your fingers because, of course, when you push on it, you don't want to push on the part you are soldering onto because that will get hot, obviously. So with the socket in there, I could just try this new PLA in there. But before I try that, I'm actually going to try a little experiment. So the oscilloscope is connected to pin 20, which is the chip select line on the kernel ROM, the one I think might be problematic. The PLA is still out of the machine, and I have here a 4.7K resistor. I took a 4.7K resistor and I connected it between pin 28 and pin 16 on the PLA socket, which is 5 volts on pin 28 and the chip select line on the ROM here. So if everything is working correctly with the ROM chip, it should just pull the kernel ROM permanently high to 5 volts on this pin. Remember, this was a pin that we never saw really coming off of ground. It was only coming up a little bit. So let's turn this on and check out the oscilloscope. And there it is. It pulled it right up to 5 volts. which means that I don't think there's anything wrong at all with the kernel ROM, and I think everything that was going wrong was the PLA. So I'm going to take my known good PLA from part 1. It was one, didn't come out of any particular machine. Well, I think it did, I don't remember which. And I'm going to pop this into the socket here, and I'm going to hold the oscilloscope on pin 20, and we're going to turn it on. Look at that. That looks a lot more normal than what we saw before. So let me plug in the video output. I am still totally assuming that there's bad RAM on this, but the PLA, I think, was definitely bad. So here we go, let's turn this on. Oh, wait, look at that. It came up, and right away, out of memory error in 0. That is an indicator of bad RAM, but the machine is kind of running enough. So let's first off try the full diagnostic one, not dead test, but the one that requires the harness for full operation. Because as we learned in part 1, dead test is not a reliable RAM test. So here we go, and it was shifted down again. It's so annoying. It's obviously this monitor. Hey, look at that. Right away, bad, 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 bad. Tons of bad RAM. And that is completely likely because of this crappy empty RAM that's on this board. Yeah. So I'm gonna have to desolder all those RAM chips. So why don't I get a marker, and I'm gonna mark up all of the ones that it says are bad. U9, U11, 21, 22, 23, and 24. All those MT RAM chips. I should just pull out, I'm gonna pull them all out. All the MT RAM is coming out of this machine. And there we go. I removed all 8 of the MT RAM chips. My method resulted in perfect desoldering, no lifted traces or anything. So I'm ready to install sockets in here to replace these chips. But why don't we first test these in the ZIF machine, see which of these are actually bad. Because remember, I wrote on them with a Sharpie which one the diagnostic said were bad. So let's check that out for ourselves in a known good machine. I've popped the first RAM chip into U22 here, and let's see what it says. Look at that, it was lying. It said U9 and U11 were bad. Well, those chips are existing ones on this machine that I know are fine, and I just inserted that chip into U22. This was one of the ones that said were bad. Let's try one of the ones that I didn't draw on with a Sharpie that it said were good. And there we go, it shows all of the RAM is good now. So that's actually a valuable lesson here, that even this diagnostic test, which shows you the position of the bad RAM, isn't always right. Because this MT RAM chip that I stuck in here was definitely in U22, and it didn't even say bad, it just said bad on these two over here. But so far, the one that was marked bad, it was bad, and the one that was marked good is actually good. Let's try another bad chip. Oh, that one was falsely accused of being bad because it's actually good. I'll put the good RAM chips up here near the top and the bad RAM chips down here near the bottom. Then we have another chip that I had drawn on as bad that is actually good. Oh, we have another one. Okay, I didn't mark that one as bad in the first place. I had just removed it, and it is actually good. Here's one that I had marked as bad. Let's see what happens now. Oh, bad, and lots of bad. It's showing bad all over the place. So that one kind of is trashing the bus. So far we have 2 bad chips and 4 good ones, with 2 more to go. Oh, another one that's good that I had marked as bad. So another falsely accused chip. And the final one that I had marked as bad that might be good is actually good. So out of all of those bad RAM chips we had, only 2 are actually bad and 6 are fine. One more experiment to try. I'm going to take one of the good chips and we're going to put this in the motherboard, and I switched this over to dead test. Let's just see what dead test says about this RAM here. Should show everything is good. And then I'm going to pop these bad RAM chips into this motherboard so we can see if dead test actually detects that these chips are bad. All right, so all the RAM tests passed, and that's with the chip that I accused of being bad, but was actually good according to the other diagnostic. Now we're going to put one of these known bad chips into U22, and let's see what dead test does now. Oh, it's flashing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We got 6 flashes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Just checking to make sure that it's consistent, flashing 6 every time. And yes, it's flashing 6 every time. So I have the dead test manual up here on archive.org, and it says 6 flashes is U22, which is indeed where I have the bad RAM chip. So at least in this case, if one chip were bad, dead test would have directed us to the bad chip. Of course, originally on that machine, the other machine, had a bad PLA. You're not going to get any kind of dead test activity with a bad PLA. I'm sticking in the other bad RAM chip. Let's see if we still get 6 flashes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We do. Excellent. So in this case, dead test would have been successful at detecting these RAM chips. Although, what's going to happen if I put 2 of these in? Let's pop with this one in here, and I'm going to switch one of these other good chips out with the other bad chip here, and we'll just see what happens exactly. So one bad RAM chip is in U22, and the other one is going to be going into, what is this, U12. There we go. Now when we turn this on, what's going to happen exactly? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We got 6 flashes. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so we got 6 flashes again. Let's pop out this bad chip that it said was the bad one, and I'm going to pop in this known good chip here. So now the only bad chip is in here, which is U12. U12 is 1 flash. And we got 1 flash. Hey, again, dead test doing its job. Awesome. All right, so I have the dead parts bin here, and even though I know that 6 of these RAM chips are actually good, all of these are going to be going into the into the dead parts bin, because I don't trust those MT RAM chips. I will not use those in any of my machines. I will not willingly put one back into a machine. So all 64K of that RAM is in here. All right, so first thing I need to do is replenish the RAM that's in here. So I'm going to use a TI chip that's right here in my little thingy of chips. And that's because I stole the RAM chip out of here to go on the machine from part 1. So if we turn this on without any cartridge, I should get the basic screen prompt thing. No, I do not. We got a black screen going on. Is this bad RAM again? Let's pop in the dead test. Why don't we do the dead test? Let it tell me what chip is bad. The one I just put in, is it bad? 1 flash? 1 flash. Well, that's unbelievable. I even had a little check mark on there right there to say that I had tested that chip. TI RAM chips are generally more reliable. Let's make sure I didn't bend any of the pins. Nothing is bent. Let's move this one, which I think was from the same batch, back over here. So where it originally was. And let's put this one in the ZIF socket. So I've just swapped these 2 around. So if this is a bad chip, 6 flashes, it's a bad chip. Oh my. Yeah, 6 flashes again. Okay, so that chip is bad, even though I had it in my on my little sheet here of chips that I thought were good. So yet another one in the dead parts bin. Ugh. All right, why don't we go for a different brand? Here's a Motorola part. Let's try this one. In fact, before I replace the 8 chips on the other machine, I should probably go through and just quickly test them all in here. Okay, there we go. We have the basic prompt. Finally, a good chip. I'm just going to run the RAM test diagnostic here on this RAM I just put in here. But as I was saying, I'm going to find 8 64K chips in my parts here, and I'm going to test all of them on this machine first. So I'm not putting a bad chip into that other board where I might be confused about why it's not working again. So I found 8 working RAM chips. None of them are MT brand. These all work fine in the full RAM test on the other machine. I found 8 sockets here for this board. And while I was searching for those, I actually found one more bad RAM chip. This one here is an NEC branded one, so that's bad. And then of course, here's the original bad PLA that was in this machine. So let me pop these sockets and this RAM into this board, and then we can run a full diagnostic on this thing and see if it's fixed. And just like that, we have a fresh set of 64K of RAM in this machine, all nicely socketed. And of course, it's already tested, so I know it should work. Let's turn on the computer, see what we see here. I'm sure this is going to be fine now. Come on. There it is. It's the shifted down part. Don't worry, that's nothing to do with the computer. But there we go, 64K of RAM. It looks good. I'm popping the diagnostic cartridge in. Let's just make sure the RAM test passes. And then I'm going to plug in the test harness here, because we're not totally out of the water yet. We might have bad CIAs. I need to put the SID back in there to give that a full test. But so far, so good. Okay, so this seems to have frozen on the RAM test 1. Let me power cycle it and try one more time. I think there might be an issue because I have these 3 chips right here on the top row are 300 nanosecond RAM chips, which might be too slow for the 64. I mean, they worked in the other machine. I ran all of these through the RAM test, but it didn't have 3 of them in at once. It just had a single one at a time. So this could be throwing the timing off. And yep, it's froze again. So I'm gonna right away suspect that these 3 chips are the problem here. Too slow. The 300 nanosecond chips are out. These are them here. I put 150 nanosecond chips in there. Untested though, so these could be bad. If we get black screen, okay, we're not getting a black screen, so that's good. So let's see what happens now. Okay, this is interesting. It's frozen again. I'm wondering if this revision doesn't work on PAL machines. I'm not sure I've actually ever tested this on a PAL 64. I should grab another board. I have one handy, and I should run this through. I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna grab another PAL board so we can give a test just to rule out that it's not this ROM that's the problem. Here is another 64 PAL board. This one was donated by Dave out of the UK. Thanks, Dave, if you're watching. You sent this in for me. I don't think it needed to have any repairs done. I mean, all the original RAM is on here. Some of these chips are socketed, but I don't think I had to fix anything. So Diagnostic ROM cartridge is in. Let's see if this runs. This has an R1 VIC2 chip, PAL chip, which has different looking colored outputs. Not to mention it's not as clear. Oh, look, it's passing the tests. So that means there's some kind of a fault with the other board still. Well, that is interesting. All right, back on the number 2 board here, I have it set to dead test. Let's see if dead test behaves differently. The mystery deepens. 0 page shows as bad. 0 page is just the very first 256 bytes of memory that is very fast to access for the processor, just the way the opcodes work. And this is showing bad, although I think the other test tested 0 page and it said it was fine. What is going on? There's gotta be one of these chips here that's kind of marginal. So I swapped out this NEC chip here, 200 nanoseconds with another Motorola, so 150. All of these are 150 nanoseconds, so everything is the same speed now at least. Let's see if this shows differently on this dead test. And if it does, then I'll go back to the other diagnostic. But I'm kind of stumped. I've never seen a problem like this where the machine, no, it still says bad. What is happening here? This is wild. Back on the other diagnostic, just to run over here, it says 0 page okay. So this is why I'm so confused. Why is there a difference between 0 page on this test and it freezes up on RAM test 1 and the other one on the dead test shows 0 page as faulty? And like I said, I tested all of this RAM in the other board, in my ZIF board, and I let it run through the full RAM tests here on this diagnostic cartridge, and it was fine. So what's going on with this? I'm just going to remove this TI RAM, and I'll pop in something else, just to eliminate what's going on here. This is so confusing. Nope, and I just stuck in different RAM and it still shows as 0 page bad. At this point, I am suspecting that the CPU is the problem. The PLA we know we can rule out because I'm already pretty sure this is a good one, this A2S100 one. And then the Plankton here, well, obviously that one works too. So what the PLA does, just in case you're not familiar, is it is what selects the different chips. So when you're trying to access the kernel ROM, it selects that chip, so it talks on the data bus, or the basic ROM, and the video chip, and the cartridge port, and all that kind of stuff. So if the PLA is bad, that is why this machine wasn't working originally, because it was always keeping the kernel ROM selected all the time, even when it shouldn't have been. So that was just stomping all over the other chips and stuff, and nothing could run. But now the PLA is ruled out. The RAM is good. I mean, I've swapped all the RAM around multiple times. All that's really left to me is that the CPU is somehow faulty on here and causing this issue. I don't really know what else. I've never seen this particular issue before. So I think what I'm going to be having to do now is I'm going to socket the CPU and we'll see if this problem just changed with a different CPU, or maybe I'll put this CPU in my ZIF board and see if the problem exists there. And yes, before I remove the CPU, the machine does boot into basic, flashing cursor, everything seems normal. I haven't tried to play a game on this thing yet. I'm assuming there's gonna be issues. Why don't we just do that actually right now? I'll put the Easy Flash 3 cartridge in here. This does not have any issues with Easy Flash because of course it is not a Rev A board that has that, whatever that fault is that prevents Easy Flash from working. So we'll turn that on. Why don't we try Galancia? Now remember, I don't have a SID chip in here, so we're not gonna hear any of the sound. Well, let's see if this game works. I mean, if the 0 page were bad, or there was something bad in there, there's no way a game would run. And it seems to be working, although wait, nope. Yeah, look, it's fine. What is happening that the diagnostics are failing? But a game like Galancia can actually work without fault. So a real mystery. I think before I do the final desoldering of the CPU, why don't I take the VIC out? Since it's in a socket, it only takes me a second to swap this out with the one from the other PAL board I just had out a second ago. Let's just make sure that that is not causing an issue. We know that the VIC chip interacts with the RAM, right? We've already established that in part 1. So I'm gonna put this R1 chip onto the other board and we'll just see if that problem goes away. I'd say that there's pretty much no chance that this is gonna fix it, but you know, I might as well try it, right? Because it is possible. And since this won't take any effort to just plug a chip in here, may as well do it. All right, there we go. Turn this on with the diag cartridge installed. Will it pass the RAM test? I really don't think it will, but anything is possible. Nope, it's still frozen on there. Let's just do one final test with dead test. And there it is, 0 page is still bad. So it has nothing to do with the VIC chip. All right then, I'm gonna pull the CPU out. And the CPU has been removed. So that's the original CPU. There's a 40-pin socket there. Let's try the CPU from the ZIF machine in here. Does it power up? Hopefully. Okay, there we go, it's working. And let's put in the diagnostic cartridge. Here we go. And it's frozen on 0 page. This is dead test. It's, oh wait, okay. It was the CPU. Unbelievable. All right, well, I'm gonna switch over to the other diagnostic now. Will it freeze on RAM test 1? Look at that. It didn't freeze. Unbelievable. It was the CPU. Some kind of marginal failure where it mostly worked, but it wouldn't pass the diagnostics. How crazy. That's just, I have never seen anything like that. And it kind of sucks because these CPUs aren't super common. All right, well, now the diagnostics are fully running. Let's put in the test harness and the SID chip and see if everything works. Test harness is connected. The SID chip is reinstalled. Let's see what this does. Interesting, control port bad. That's just like on the last one. Here's the SID test speaker. Oh no, the SID is bad. It's just making this kind of low-pitched rumble sound. Well, that is a bit of the bummer. That could explain why the control port is bad. It does say right here 6581 is bad, so it's not the two CIAs that are bad, but that. So it's got to be those paddle ports on this dead SID. I've switched over to the Easy Flash. I'm going to connect the original keyboard that came with this machine. It's actually really clean. Let's see if this keyboard is working okay. Yeah, everything seems to be working. I mean, it's not a thorough test, but it's definitely typing. Let's go into Adrian's tools and try 8-bit Dance Party. I'm not expecting any sound. Nope, there's just sort of this background buzzing and that's it. We have no sound. Just for fun, we'll try the SID tester here. Run all tests. Big fat nothing on all of those. Let me pop out the SID, make sure I didn't bend any of the pins putting it in. Nope, no pins are bent. I'm just gonna do a final test in the ZIF machine just to make sure there's no components on that board that are causing the issue with the SID. Or I suppose I could have tried that SID in the other machine, but oh, I don't have a CPU. Let's use this cruddy CPU for now. In fact, why don't we run the diagnostics on this machine and see if it locks up in exactly the same way. Actually, I'm getting a black screen on this machine now. Oh, it's missing a RAM chip. Doy. There we go, it booted right up. Let's put this cartridge in and let's see if we get any sound out of this. Adrian's Tools 8-bit Dance Party. Here we go. Same problem, absolutely nothing. So for sure, yet another dead SID. How about the diagnostics? I think I can run it off here. Let's see if it freezes on the same spot it did on the other machine. I may have to switch back to this one though. Who knows, the Easy Flash 3 might be running the diagnostic in a slightly different way. Indeed, it's the CPU. It froze on this machine as well. So this CPU is bad. I will write marginal on here though. Only because it does actually work, so for testing purposes, I suppose it's useful. Like, it's better than no CPU. It did seem to run at least one game. I would just imagine that things might be a little unstable in certain games. I mean, there's gotta be some symptoms outside of these diagnostic tests, right? All right, summary time for this PAL 64 board that Yuli sent me. So first off, I determined the PLA was indeed bad. Next, it turned out that there were at least some bad MT RAM chips. There were only 2 out of the original 6 that the diagnostic ROM had said were bad, but since, of course, MT RAM chips are all prone to failure, they're all gonna fail, I just replaced them all. And then it turned out that the CPU worked, but is marginal and actually fails on some of the diagnostic tests around 0 page. So with the right new CPU in there, this machine works. And then finally, it also had a bad SID chip. As I said on the part 1 of the Repair-a-thon, this generation of board built in the late to mid 83 into the 84s are the most unreliable. It seems like all the chips start to go bad on these. I mean, I'm surprised these ROMs and the CIAs and the VIC are working, but maybe it's a matter of time because yeah, lots of failures on this thing. But it is fixed now, so let me update the notes on the little cartridge shield here. I'm going to mark an X on the PLA chip. That is definitely bad. The X here on the SID, I'll just reinforce that. And this RAM chip here is one of the ones I had in my stock that was bad. So I think there were 2 of those that were bad as well. So yeah, bad chips galore. And dead part spin is here. So that's one bad SID. That's one bad PLA. Bad RAM chip. I'm not going to throw the CPU in here. I'll just stick this over on the side here because I can use this for testing. We still have 3 more machines to go through. Who knows? There might be more with bad CPUs. At least I can use this one to revive one of those, right? And there we have it. The number 2 board is fixed. Thanks, Yuli, for sending this in. It's too bad it has quite a lot of failures, but since I don't have a lot of PAL boards, I'm definitely going to take some good SID CPU parts from some other board, an NTSC board, pop it onto this one, because I would rather have a working PAL 64 board than an extra working NTSC one. I have enough of those. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, I appreciate a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe because there's going to be 3 more repair videos for 64s. Maybe they'll be tough, maybe they'll be easy. Nobody knows. And of course, if you didn't like this video, you know what to do, all that YouTube-y stuff. And stay healthy, stay safe, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.